Our name is Ghosts Want You Dead. Woe is upon those who walk the line between civilization and the wilds of their own mind, for they must find respite in some white, vacuous limbo. They must untether from inner and outer worlds for a time. For each landscape, the external and internal, have become equally inhospitable in their own right. Hello, I'm Rebecca, and I'm back. And Matthew's back from his vacation.
I sure am. We've been trying to record this since Saturday, and we've been putting it off and putting it off, and here we
Ghosts
are.
are a hot mess, quite frankly, but
he-
we're here.
Here we are at 10:30 on Tuesday, finally recording, and we make no promises as to the quality of this episode because, uh, yeah, here
Yeah,
we go.
Matthew has been moving and or has moved and has been on vacation and yeah, it's been wild. So but this again is like our second or no, like third physical attempt at recording. So what you get is what you get and you don't throw a fit. That's what I tell my kids.
And there will be light editing, so you will probably hear more uhs and ums than
You'll
normal.
hear all of my annoying breath sounds. I'm a very mouthy person. So enjoy that
Um,
episode. No, do you want to talk? Do you have anything? Do you want to
I
tell the
can't
people about your
I can't
vacation a little bit?
no, I'm going to tell the people that I have already told them about my trip in the recording we tried to do last night at 3 o'clock in the morning that we finally called it quits on at 4:30 in the morning when we were still at the end of episode 2. And so, if you want to hear my unhinged 3 a.m. bitching about my trip, subscribe at least to the $5 Patreon because I will stick that on the bonus episode this month.
There's lots of fun things about it. That part we did good, and then when I was trying to read my notes from last week, I just couldn't make my mouth work right. So, but I can make it work right now a
I
little
thought it
bit.
was your eyes that were the problem.
Well, it was both. My glasses broke and I was having to hold up my little like okay, so they broke on one side earlier in the day and I was like, that's fine. I can just use it like this and just kind of prop my hand here. But then the other one broke and so then it was like tiny little just the spectacles. So I was just holding them up to my face while trying to read my dang phone. But I went to the Walgreens and uh
She
now I
can
have
see, it's a
glasses. It's a
miracle.
miracle. The baby Jesus at the Walgreens healed me with reading glasses.
Another thing that I already said last night that I will say again is, listeners, I imagine you recall if you've been with us since the beginning that our initial plan was to watch all the episodes of Dark Shadows together, but then I got carried away in the first couple of weeks and watched like 300 of them. And so the episodes we'll discuss this week, I have seen, but it's been a few months. So Rebecca watched them and took notes and is going to tell me and you all about this week's episodes.
And it is a doozy, folks. We have reached our seance spectacular.
It's not really spectacular. We're not doing anything extra.
That's true. We had planned to maybe do our own seance, but that's not
Then
happening.
we are barely doing this episode. So
We'll do a seance another time. What we're gonna do. I'm gonna tell you about ghosts wanting you dead and things. I'm gonna tell you about dark shadows. Are you guys ready? Are you ready,
I'm
Matthew?
ready.
Are you
I'm
ready?
ready. I want to hear about it. I'm very eager to hear what you have to say about the seance.
Okie dokie. Well, episode 166, Victoria Winters tells us that it is a bright morning, but last night was no good and nobody slept, especially Carolyn, who's had some bad vibes about David being at Mother Mother's. Carolyn is in the drawing room and kind of just frantically pacing about, and Vicky's sitting and playing solitaire. At first, I thought that it was a tarot spread, but it was just solitaire. And Vicky's all, "Sit down, son, you're making me nervous," said Carolyn, because she's pacing all over the place, but she can't help it. She's worried about David being down with Mother. And Vicky doesn't like David being down there either, but she's all like, well, he is his mother, and kind of, has a right to her kid, which she does seem to flip flop about, but that might be bird magic. And Carolyn thinks that Roger sucks and shouldn't have let this whole sleepover business happen. Vicky is trying to calm her down, but Carolyn is just overcome with worry and premonitions of disaster. Vicky thinks Carolyn's being a little melodramatic, which I kind of thought was a little hypocritical because she has certainly been like, I heard Josette, she did this thing, but I guess that's okay. Vicky says that she's mostly just concerned that Roger made her break her word to Liz to keep David and Mother apart. And Carolyn says she knows that there's got to be more to what's going on with Mother, but can't explain why she has this feeling of dread about it. Vicky, who I'm now realizing might not intentionally be being critical so much as maybe it is bird magic, is sure sticking up for Laura and telling her that she'd never hurt David and that Laura loves him and that she wants him and that she wants him thing kind of makes me think that it might be bird magic. Or maybe she's just like, well, no, this seems to be how it is. Carolyn dramatically delivers the line, sometimes love can be the most harmful thing of all. And she goes on to say that David is in terrible danger. Opening credits. Victoria says that Carolyn can't keep David under lock and key and that there's nothing that either of them can really do about him being at Mother's because Roger's already signed off on it. And Carolyn says, well, she can go over there and tell Laura to leave Collinwood, but Vicky's like, "You can't do that, because she'll just take David, and what do you think will happen when Liz comes home and finds David gone?" And Carolyn is just frustrated with the whole thing, but particularly Uncle Roger. Vicky says that, "Oh, by the way, also, Dr. Guthrie probably wouldn't like folks leaving before he fully investigates Liz's haunted coma." Carolyn says, "Oh, yeah, I guess, especially Laura, since Laura was the last person to see Liz before going into the trance." And Carolyn hopes that Dr. Guthrie will find something. And Vicky says, well, there is this one thing that he kind of maybe wanted to try. Carolyn's like, well, what is it? And Vicky tentatively says, the seance. And Carolyn's like, I thought this dude was a scientist, not a spiritualist, and seems a little skeptical. Vicky thinks that it couldn't hurt, especially because of Josette and all the other spooky goings on all the time. Carolyn says they might as well and jokes that it might be fun touching fingertips and knocking knees because even though she's depressed because of her mother's magic coma, she's still Carolyn. Gotta rub up on somebody.
Her uncle, her secret half sister, who cares?
Somebody, just get over here. Oh, Carolyn. Anyway, David comes home and Carolyn runs to him and hugs him, rubs up on David. She goes and hugs him and just squeezes the life out of him and is like, I'm so glad you're home. And David's like, gee, you'd think I'd been gone 100 years. And they ask him if
Also,
he,
we don't like each other. Why are
yeah,
you being nice?
why, why the sudden change of heart, friend? And They ask him if he's had a good time, and he says that he did and he's gonna do it again. Carolyn doesn't like this and says that, well, we'll talk about it some other time, doing her best woman of the house, Liz deflection move. But David says there isn't anything to talk about, and his mother has already said that he could, and she is his mother. And Carolyn's like, "Well, you're still under our care, so you should do what we say." And Vicky kinda cuts in to try to signal that she needs to back off a little bit, but David's already pissed and rebellious and is like, "Well, you're not my real Liz," and she can't stop him. Mother wants him. Vicky kind of tries to change tact and asks him to recount the night. And David says that it was pretty chill and that he ate and slept and played, and it was more just being there with Mother that he likes. Vicky asks if anything happened that might have been spooky or weird or frightened him. And he's like, no, nothing can get him when he's at his mother's cottage. They ask why, and he says because Josette and that he knows she's there. Carolyn asks how he knows, and he says because of her powerful ghost stink. And he says, well, she's watching over Mother's house to be sure that it is safe. Because Josette is watching over David. And he goes to sit by the fire because he's a little baby bird boy now in training, and the girls look over at each other with concern. There is a knock at the door. Carolyn goes to answer it, and Vicky notices David sitting by the fire, so she calls his name, but he doesn't respond. And she calls his name again and goes over and puts her hand on his shoulder, but he is doing baby firebird magic, so he can't be bothered. So then we get a close up of the fire and a dramatic musical flair. At the door, it's Matthew, your boyfriend, but not Carolyn's anymore. Joe
Mine
Haskell
and
Coach.
Maggie's boyfriend.
Your well, but not yet. Not yet. They're not officially a couple yet.
Oh, okay.
That happens in a little bit. Shh, don't tell. It's a secret. Uh, Joe's back. I hadn't seen Joe in a minute. I don't know if he was in the last episodes because I didn't watch those or just listened to the podcast with the rest of you. Carolyn seems surprised and pleased to see him. He seems less pleased and says the accountant sent him up to get a ledger from Liz's desk. She invites him in and he awkwardly steps into the foyer. She says it's been a long time and he nods and is like, "Yep, long time." She asks how he's been. He says, "No complaints, you." And you can tell he's being standoffish and trying to keep things light and professional. She says that she's been busy with everything with her mother, and he says that he had heard about it and was so sorry to hear about Liz, and he seems genuine in this. He asks, "What have the doctors said?" And she says nobody knows yet and they're still running tests. And he says that if he can be of any help to let him know. She says thanks and she appreciates the offer after everything they've been through. And he says, "Oh, that has nothing to do with it. Forget it. I have." And this pisses Carolyn off. And she pulls a face and she turns her body from him and she asks what he's heard about Liz and what are people saying. Joe says that it's a mixed bag of opinions and everyone has one and is again just trying to keep things light. She asks if anyone's been saying anything about spooky stuff or the strange and unnatural about her illness. He says, "Yeah, some," and she hates this and gets upset, and she says she wishes people wouldn't talk that way. But Joe is pretty much like, "Look, you can't control it. Everyone loves a haunted house, and in a small town, it's essentially the only form of entertainment, and everyone's always talking about how y'all are spooky. That's just the reality of things, so kinda deal with it a little bit." But then he was like he did comfort her by saying, "No one really means any harm by it, and everyone does wish Liz the best and holds no ill will because she's always played straight with them." And Carolyn thanks Joe, and this is where this conversation should have ended, but it doesn't. And she then asks, what he's been up to, and he says his usual 8 hours of rest, 8 hours of work, 8 hours of play. She asks if he's got any new playmates, and he says some, and she teases him for being monosyllabic, by saying, "Oh, you're so New England. Why use 2 words when 1 will do?" And he goes, "Yep." But now that Carolyn knows that Burke's just been using her, she is asking Joe questions, attempting to lead him up to whether or not he'd be willing to give her a second chance. And he does not seem willing. She presses some more and is asking about new beginnings. And he's like, well, a new beginning isn't a new beginning with the same old people, which true, right? Uh, she quoted the poetic she quoted something poetically and dramatically and says, "I see the moving finger, right," and then move on. And Joe gets a little salty and says, "I don't know anything about moving fingers, but I'm moving on." And she finally stops playing at it and says, "Well, she's moving on too, but moving and growing and changing, and she's free again and wants to give it another go." And he's like, "Well, I'm not." She turns away again and is pissed and acts like he's trying to hurt her back. And he's like, "I'm not trying to get back at you. It's just fact. I'm not available for this bullshit anymore." And she says, "Well, all right, I'll get the ledger now." And she starts to go upstairs, and he says that they can still be friends if you want. And she says, "Okay," she would like that. He seems
Yeah,
resolute.
sorry, I don't think she really is all that interested in getting back with him. She's just upset about her mother's magic health problems and being in charge and is like, "You know, what would ease the tension is some good old-fashioned boy drama. Let's just see."
Sure, yeah, maybe I could stir something up,
Yeah.
distract myself. That makes sense. Joe seems resolute on not being involved in Carolyn's boy drama anymore, and good for him. Back by the fire, Vicky's talking to David and says he got good sleep and he had a dream, but not a nightmare. It was the most beautiful dream in the world, and that his mother held him in the night and he was happy to be together again. He says he was silly before when he was afraid of her, and Vicky seems concerned by this. At the Blue Whale, Sam is getting drunk and being loud and obnoxious. Surprise!
You don't say.
Maggie looks on in horror and quiet sadness and seems pretty forlorn, but Joe is sitting next to her and takes her face in his hand and turns her chin toward him. And that is pretty much the hottest move that you can do is putting your hands on people's faces. The ladies like that.
I don't know. Maybe that's a lady thing. Listeners weigh in. Face touching, yay or nay. Personally,
100%.
outside of the context of sex, don't fucking touch my face.
Sure. That's funny. Well, no, I don't know. For me, you touch my face. Anyway, Joe grabs Maggie by the face and, uh, is like, "Hey, pay attention to me," essentially, but he's like, "Hey, you're here with me," and
Who cares about
she
your
yeah,
problems?
don't focus on that, and she apologizes even though she was just sitting there worried about her drunk father embarrassing her and being sad, and Joe tells her to stop worrying about her father and maybe worry about him. And this whole run of flirtation to me seems weird and contradictory to what we know of Joe, but maybe he's trying a different tack after being a doormat to Carolyn and trying to be bad Joe Brown or whatever. But he's teasing Maggie and saying that he might just go fishing for other girls or something. And he tells her that he saw Carolyn today." And she's like, "Well, that's not a fish. That's a stone or that's a giant stone crab," which is kind of a great bitchy insult that I'd like to incorporate into my speech. Giant stone crab. I don't know. Anyway, Maggie is like, "Well, if you wanna get your head bit off again, be my guest, Buster." And she
Mm,
starts to get a little colder and pull away, and she's
yeah.
clearly disappointed and bracing herself and her heart for Joe to say he's flipped or flopped again on Carolyn. He tells her that he went up to Collinwood for a ledger for work, but that she was being real nice and wants to give things another go. And he's just only giving a little information at a time and clearly, intentionally, and purposefully upsetting Maggie for no fucking good reason. And I hate it. But she's like, "Well, congratulations," and turns away and is clearly upset and uncomfortable and wants to change the subject. But he's like, "Well, I told her to get bent and that he isn't free anymore." And she's like, "Well, if you're referring to me, I don't see any ropes holding you." And then trying to be all smooth and suave, he says, "Well, you may not see them, but they are there." And they kiss and she melts at him and gushes. I personally would have been annoyed and pissed at all of that performative jealousy inducing dance, but whatever, Joe. I guess he's forgiven because he's Joe and he's maybe the nicest and the sweetest of all of the, horrible misogynistic men in the 1960s show so far. Well, they're sweet and holding hands and making googly eyes, but Sam's raucous and drunken laughter makes Maggie turn her attention over to him. Then Joe starts trying to not get her to pay attention to drunk daddy and is kind of making excuses for him, saying that he's had a hard time lately and to leave him be, and he was kind of condescending and dismissive of the fact that he's an actual alcoholic, going far as to say he's entitled to a few drinks, Maggie, and Maggie has to explain to him, even though it should be obvious to him and the rest of the town, that he is a drunk and can't drink normally, which is clearly, you know, something everybody knows, but he is right that she should hit some Al-Anon meetings and stop focusing on it, but it did seem kind of manipulative and gross. Anyway, she is hoping that he's not talking about the fire magic painting, and she goes on about it again, and Joe just tells her to go ahead and go meddle with old booze for brains because she's going to anyhow, and he's good-natured about it, and she kisses his forehead and goes over. She comes up behind Sam, and he's being drunk and obnoxious, and he's trying to drink enough to forget, and goes over to the jukebox and tells Maggie that the painting is haunting him. Maggie says to stop talking about it to people, but he says folks are seeking him out to ask him about it. And she's like, "Really? Oh, fuck." But he says that Dr. Ghostbuster had been asking around and he thinks he's trying to confirm his own conclusions. Maggie doesn't understand how Liz's illness and the painting could be connected, and he doesn't know either. And she says she's scared of all the kooky, spooky stuff at Collinwood. And Sam says that it makes him curious. She wants them to have nothing to do with it. She would rather just not go anywhere near any of them Collinses. He lights a cigarette and stares at the match, all hypnotized like, and Maggie looks concerned and blows it out before he is hypnotized, firebird magic, ties, whatever. Anyway, he's gonna go get another drink, and she says, "Haven't you had enough?" And he says, "If I don't make enough, ah," like some kind of cartoon drunk. And it was kind of funny the way he did it. Uh, we pan the bar, and there's a fun little cha-cha number playing on the jukebox, and it's fun. And Burke enters and saddles up to Joe's table and says, "Hello, Haskell." Joe seems surprised, and Burke asks if he can join him, and Joe says, Go ahead." Burke thinks it's a good time for a truce since now he's done wooing Joe's ex-girlfriend to use and manipulate. Joe says that's fine by him, and Burke says that he has enough enemies in Collinsport. Joe says that they are no longer enemies and that he's done with Carolyn and he can have her. Burke's like, "Well, funny you mention it, same." And Joe's kind of like, "Huh, well." And then they kind of talk some shit on Carolyn and agree that she wants what she can't have and she's spoiled but nice sometimes. And Bert goes on to say he treated her as badly as she treated Joe. And Joe just says that he's glad that now he has sweet old reliable Maggie, which the way he talked about it was like, "Oh, I've got old reliable Maggie the mule." Like, I kind of thought it was, I don't know. I guess in comparison, she is reliable, so it isn't weird to say that, but just think old
Yeah,
reliable. Like,
I can see how that would seem a little shitty.
well, and he's already not winning me any favors or not winning any favors from me in this episode. Um, but I mean, he's been great so far, so we'll give him a little bit of time to maybe have some other writers write for him or something. But
Mhm.
Burke agrees that Maggie's great, and at that time she joins them. She asks what they were talking about, and Burke is all, "A wonderful girl, you." And Joe physically moves his body closer to Maggie, like leaning in across the table to assert some kind of dominance, and asks about Maggie's father that he was just telling her not to talk about. But he understandably doesn't trust Burke around his lady companions. Maggie says that her dad said Dr. Ghostbuster had been asking him a bunch of questions, which is weird. And Burke is interested in this and is asking what the doctor asked. And she said that he asked about the painting. Joe is like, "Well, what does that have to do, with her illness?" And Burke is looking pensive and thoughtful. She says that he's just asking questions about the Collinses in general as well, and Burke excuses himself and says he's going to buy her father a drink, and she jokes, "Oh, that's just what he needs." And he goes over and talks with him and buys him a drink and gets a bourbon and water for himself, and he starts grilling him about Dr. Guthrie, and Sam says he answered all of his questions, and Sam says that Dr. Guthrie was particularly interested in his painting of Laura engulfed in flames. In credits. Episode 167. Victoria
Six,
Windsor's.
7, like the kids say.
I still don't
Woo.
understand that, but
I
that's
don't
fine.
either, but I know they do it.
They do. Victoria Winters lets us know that it's calm in the day at Collinwood, but spooky at night, which is what she says in various phrasings whenever she wants to let us know that it's daytime. And I think she did it in the first episode we did
Mhm.
today too. But we pull out of the flames of the drawing room fireplace and pan to see Victoria sitting next to it. She's telling someone off screen a retelling of David's dream that he had told her. She says that David was there and there was no light and he could hear the ocean. And Mother was walking with him on the beach and they were holding hands and he thought they were the only two people in the world itself, an infinite, endless space. And I was like, that sounds like Mother put some mushrooms in his cocoa for bedtime. We pan out and we can see Dr. Guthrie and he asks if it frightened him. She says no, and that is what frightens her. He asks her to continue. She continues, but in an extremely poetic and dramatic cadence, not unlike the recitation of The Highwayman by Anne Shirley, as performed by Megan Fallows in the 1985 Canadian television adaptation miniseries of Lucy Maud Montgomery's novel Anne of Green Gables. And I'm
That
not
is
going to
not
try
a
to do it.
cultural touchstone for me.
It was for
The
me, and
Yeah.
again, like, women of a certain age, like, their faces touched and, like Anne of Green Gables, like, that's just facts I know.
That is very funny.
True, though. Vicky says David had noticed how silent Mother was, and also that she had fire eyes, and was moving, and they were moving into the light, Carol Ann, and there was this loud roaring in the light, and they get closer and closer, and her eyes are even more bonkers, and the fire grew and grew, and then they ran into it. And then she says, once her long haunting soliloquy is complete, and that was David's dream. Man, groovy. Yeah. Guthrie says, I wonder if it really was a dream. Dramatic music, opening credits. Vicky thinks that it's crazy and had to be a dream. Dr. Ghostbuster thinks it's a vision. And he's concerned that David wasn't frightened at all. He thinks that a regular kid would have reservations about going with Mother, even if things weren't weird. And doesn't think that his absolute and sudden trust in Mother is really within David's personality at all. Laura is begging Roger for David, and she says she needs him, and she's frantic and demanding, and she's like, "Give him to me now," and pacing and begging. Roger, in a hot mock turtleneck sweater, says that she'll have him soon, but this doesn't pacify her. She's panicking and saying, well, she doesn't have time. She's running out of time. And Roger's like, what does that mean? It doesn't make sense. She's panicking, trying to cover it up, and is like, well, if Liz comes back, she's not going to let me take him. And Roger doesn't totally buy this. He thinks that that's not really what she meant. She goes, of course, that's what I meant. And then gets like steely and says, what else could I have meant? He says he has a feeling it's something else, and they go back and forth, and she's begging and demanding. He says this is out of character for her. She says Liz can't stop him legally, even if she were here and not in a bird coma. So why doesn't he sign his kid away already? And he says that Liz has other means of control.
You'd think that he would just be honest with her because they have been scheming partners in the past, and he was just trying to get her to scheme with him again.
Yeah.
You would think he would just be like, "Well, I would, but she said she'd cut me off." So,
Yeah. No, 100%. I think that that would make sense. Anyway, she says, "Well, instead of me being a legal guardian, why don't I you just let me have him, and I promise I'll bring him back, if Liz wakes up and wants him and is, clearly lying." But she's pleading and straight up says she's never begged before, but she's begging now, and he continues to say that's just not gonna happen. And once she realizes that he's not going to budge, she's like, "Well, what if I mention the word manslaughter to Burke Devlin?" And he's like, "Go ahead." And she's like, well, continues threatening him, and he says that she wouldn't really do it. Anyway, she thinks Carolyn and Vicky are trying to turn David against her, and she's all weird and panicky. She's threatening about the manslaughter in Burke, and he shuts it down and pokes holes in her threat and bluff by saying, like, well, if you do that, they'll charge you with perjury, and then you won't get David at all. He says she's just gonna have to prove her fitness for motherhood with some patience, and he leaves, and she looks frantic. Back with Vicky and Dr. Guthrie, they're talking about David's dream, and he wants to have a seance about the dream. And Vicky is like, a seance, and then Carolyn comes in and asks, "What about a seance?" And Vicky says he wants to ghost phone Josette, and Carolyn doesn't know if she believes, and also it's all a little freaky. Guthrie thinks that everyone should be at the seance, and including David, which I'll comment on later. But in my memory, it's including David, Laura, and Roger. Vicky isn't sure about David because it might scare him, but Guthrie insists. Carolyn starts talking spooky and haunted and says she has a feeling a presence and stares off with her spooky pheromone stings. We cut to them cluing Roger in about the seance, and he thinks it's bonkers and is glad that Guthrie's finally admitted he's a quack. And Guthrie's like, "Look, bud, if you want to get rid of me, the quickest way is to agree to this, because if nothing happens, I'll leave." And he's like, "Well, sweet, I'll do that." And so uh they agree, and Carolyn says that Dr. Guthrie only wants to help Mother, and Roger says, well, he's already indulged her enough. And Carolyn wonders if Dr. Guthrie expects them to talk to Laura about joining the seance or if he's going to do it himself. Roger doesn't see a way Laura would ever agree to a seance and takes his leave and says, if anyone needs me, just rap once on my night table. And uh, then saunters off, muttering about how ludicrous a seance is. Vicky comes back and Carolyn tells her that she thinks Roger's just scared of ghosts like she is. Carolyn wants to go down and kick mother the fuck out and tell her off. And Vicky is like, you can't do that. And telling Carolyn, or me for that matter, as you know, Matthew, uh, that you can't do something only makes them want to do it more.
Mhm.
Because we're just like that. We're just drawn that way. She gets her coat on and Vicky tries to talk her out of it, but she's made up her mind. She's mad and wants to go yell at Laura and have the satisfaction of seeing her face when she tells her that she knows she's involved with Liz's illness. She says she refuses to be frightened of that woman and leaves. The Laura is up to something. Music plays and Vicky is looking all around wildly and hauntedly. We see Laura's witch eyes in the fire, and there is a knock at the door. And Laura snaps out of her fire trance, and it's Carolyn asking to borrow a scarf, which is a weird random thing to come down and ask your aunt you're not friends with for. But Laura says, well, of course. And she goes over to look in a drawer. Carolyn is teasing around everything and is like, must be lonely at the cottage, but not always. And she's like, no, it is lonely, but having David here was great, and Carolyn toys with her a little more before she finally reveals that she knows about Burke seeing her the night of the coma and storm. She tries to change the subject and is like, "I thought you wanted this scarf."
Now, was Carolyn in on the conversation with Dr. Guthrie where he was like, "Maybe let's not tell her we know that yet"?
I
Because
think so, yeah.
okay, I couldn't remember.
Maybe. I don't re I was that was before. That was in the episodes that you watched that you told about, I
No,
think.
I know, I just am not remembering, but I can go back to my notes and see. But anyway, you carry on.
Sure. Anyway, they basically they're she pulls it out that, yes, Burke said that, and Laura, she denies a bunch at first, and then she's like, "Oh, well, when I was asked, it slipped my mind and it wasn't worth mentioning," and she quickly left. She weaves the tale that she was out for a walk and the storm was coming, so Liz stopped in to make sure everything was in order at her cottage in a get hostess sort of way, and then left, and that was all there was to it. And she's basically saying, "Well, it wasn't hardly worth mentioning or discussing," and Carolyn very cuntily is like, "Oh, I wasn't discussing anything," and Laura says, "Well, I wouldn't discuss it with anyone if I were you. Is that clear?" And Carolyn says, "Oh, it's clear," and Laura and Carolyn have a bitch face off, and it's great. And Laura says, "Well, do you want this scarf?" And Carolyn, who's leaving, snarls, "I don't think I need it now. It's funny how fast the weather changes. Don't you think it's funny?" And then she turns and leaves, and Laura makes a pretty good bird lady face at that point. Wha Possibly the bird lady face, but I don't think so. Anyway, end credits. Episode 168, Victoria Winters tells us everyone is fighting with Laura and things are mysterious. Laura is at the cottage doing her thing by the fire, and there's another knock. It's Burke, and she says he can't come in right now. And he says, no, he's going to come in. And she says it's impossible. He insists. And They go back and forth a bunch, like, she's like, "Get the fuck out of here, and you shouldn't have come," and he's like, "Oh, I'm here, just let me in," and he's like, "Well, I have something to tell you that might affect, you know, getting David. Do you want me to shout it out here?" So she finally relents and lets him in, opening credits. Burke says he's glad he's not a salesman because he doesn't know how much he could stand
Mhm.
shouting through a door, and she apologizes. She says she didn't want to repeat a last visit, and he says Liz is in a magic coma in Boston, so not much of a chance of her barging in again. He says he'd like to see her more and laments her being at Collinwood with all of his enemies. He says Guthrie is in town asking questions, and she's like, "Oh, yeah, I know he's here," and she coolly brushes off his concerns that Guthrie is too curious about Laura, and he tells her he was asking Sam about the painting, and that does concern her. He asks why Guthrie's so concerned with the painting, and Laura says she doesn't know, but wishes he'd leave it alone and not take Guthrie seriously. He says that he has a theory about Dr. Guthrie. He wonders why he's only interested in info about Laura and eventually gets around to the fact that he thinks he is a detective because of all of the business or dead Phoenix body. Huh, see what I did there? Get it? Phoenix
I do,
body.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
She says that the case is closed, but Burke says he's not so sure. Then he tries to see if she will tell him any more about it, and she shuts that down, and Burke says he's gonna get to the bottom of things with Guthrie. Laura is like, maybe it's all Burke's fault that people suspect her of wrongdoing in the first place because Burke said they were together and saw Liz, and now Carolyn is asking about what happened to Mother and blaming her. Burke
Mhm.
says he's worried and doesn't want anything to happen to her and takes her face in his hands because that's what ladies like. Uh, she says, that the this is me manifesting, I guess. I'm somebody take your face in my hand. Anyway, I said that wrong.
You did say it wrong.
I did say it wrong. I don't care. Somebody's face in somebody's hand. Anyway, something in somebody's hand. All right. She says to think about the future, and he says, "The future is you," and goes to kiss her, and she stops him and says, "I'm the future, not the present." Like, you get the fuck off me. And then there's a thunder crack, and she kicks him out to beat the storm. And he says, "Well, let's push the future a little," and gets his coat and kisses her on the cheek. And she is fairly unresponsive and clearly not into it. And he leaves. She lights a cigarette, and they do a fun cut from that to Sam the blue whale lighting a cigarette, and now I want a cigarette, 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 is what I wrote and also what I feel. Dr. Guthrie enters and approaches Sam, and he says he's indulging in his favorite hobby, drinking. Surprise. And they joke about how drinking is funny. Ha 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 ha, you're a drunk. And he tries to get him to join him for the drinking, but he is meeting Burke. He does decide to join him briefly and he orders Sam another drink. And Sam asks why Burke wants to meet Guthrie, and Guthrie has no idea. He just said he wanted to meet and that it had probably had something to do with Liz and the magic coma. They cheers their drinks and Sam makes jokes about drinking vitamins and haha, Sam's a drunk. Guthrie comments on Sam's hands and asks how he hurt them, and he says he wouldn't believe it. He says Laura Collins burnt his hands. Guthrie is shocked and asks Sam how, and Sam says, well, she didn't light a match to him or anything, and then goes on to tell the story of uh, fire magic, drunken cigarette, and all of that. And Guthrie, at the end of his story, dropping the cigarette on the newspaper, but then also fire magic. Guthrie says he believes Sam, and Sam would like him to help him put some of the pieces together. Just then, Burke arrives and they shake hands and say hello. He wants to get away from Sam, so he escorts Guthrie over to sit on the other side of the bar. They leave Sam at the bar and go to the table. Burke asks why Dr. Guthrie's here and the nature of his psychological investigation. Guthrie dodges questions and kind of pleads HIPAA about it and says that it's not his business. He glares at him and says, "Who are you?" And Guthrie asks, "Who do you think I am?" Like a psychiatrist, like a psychologist would, like a question for a question. And Burke says he doesn't know, but he's gonna find out. And they posture at each other a bit. Guthrie asks if he could tell him what happened when he saw Miss Collins on the night of the storm and coma. And Burke says Liz was leaving when he got there. And Guthrie asks if he's a close friend of Miss Collins. And he says an acquaintance is a better word. Guthrie says it's a safer word. And they pretty much just shut it down. Guthrie's like, well, since you're not really forthcoming, we'll consider this interview ended. And they coolly part ways. Guthrie leaves. Burke comes back over to Sam and asks about what they talked about. And Burke warns him to get it through his alcoholic head that this dude's not a friend. And Burke says he's going to find out what this guy is up to. In the cottage, Laura is laying around on the sofa, spacing out, which is a little different than her usual fire trance magic. She's doing some staring at the ceiling magic. Anyway, uh, there's another knock at the door because everybody is up to the cottage tonight. And Laura asks, who is it? And it's Guthrie. She lets him in and takes his coat. And he asks her about Liz. And she, does the same thing and is like, oh, she was leaving. And that goes pretty quickly. He invites her to the seance. And she's like, a seance? And she asks, where and for what purpose, and he says to contact Josette Collins, and she's like, "Why Josette?" And to find out what, and she's like, "To find out what she knows. Will you come?" And she looks kinda panicked at this. She says no, and he says that he thought it might be interesting and, come by if you change your mind. Then she asks who will be there, and he says, "Those who are invited, of course, and those who are uninvited." And he leaves, and Laura looks shook. End credits.
Ooh, it's almost happening.
I know, we're getting closer, and closer. Oh my. Anyway, episode 169. Victoria Winters tells us that there are unseen forces, but they are gonna do a seance, and by golly, they're gonna see them forces. Carolyn is window gazing and opens the window into the wild storm that's picking up, and there's a knock at the door. It's Guthrie. He tells her he asked Laura to the seance, and she declined. She isn't surprised, but says it might go better without her because she might impede making contact. Opening credits. She asks if he thinks he can establish communication, and he says that he can tell she's still skeptical. She isn't trying to be a downer, she just thinks it sounds pretty far out, and then asks if he's had success doing this before, and he says that he has had evidence of communication, but that's all he can say. And he says, she'll have to trust him and believe he knows what he's doing. She is worried and asks what happens if the seance doesn't work. He says, we'll just have to make a plan from there, but that he wants to do anything he can to help her mother. Vicky comes down and Carolyn asks if David is asleep, and she says not quite yet. The storm was keeping him up, and then asks when he's gonna start the seance. He says in an hour or so when David is good and asleep, which is weird because I thought that they had said they wanted David at the seance. Maybe I missed something and, like, wrote the opposite of what was being said, or somebody
Well,
decided something.
If they
Or
had any sense, they would invite David to the seance
that's what
since
I'm
he's the
saying.
psychic in the house.
Well, that's and this is something that I guess if you feel like looking up, you could look up to see if it's I didn't look it up because I wonder if it is an error or if it's like an error on my part or if it was like a continuity error. Because I swear they were talking about how he would be helpful and Guthrie was insistent that David should be there. So I don't know.
Well, I'll watch the episodes and one of our dear listeners will correct you if you're wrong.
Yes, someone please do it up. Anyway, they're like, once David's asleep, we'll start. And she asks who's gonna be there, and he says, "Just you and Carolyn and Roger and himself." Laura opted out. Someone raps at the door, and Carolyn is like, "It's late for visitors." Vicky gets the door, and it's baby boy Frank Garner because Roger called him in for an emergency. Roger comes in and whisks him away to talk privately in the study. Carolyn asks why he is here, and Vicky's like, I don't know. Roger called him in. Carolyn says she's frightened by all of the strange feelings she's having, and she makes a wild face and then gets some dramatic trumpeting. In Roger's study, BBG, which is how I type baby boy Garner, and since for the sake of brevity, we will now refer to Frank Garner or Frank Garner Jr. as BBG. Roger's unhappy with how BBG is handling the divorce and wants things shored up right away. He says he's going as fast as he can and he's wondering why the rush. And Roger says that's he and Laura's business. And, you know, not he's not going to say, and then goes on to say Laura is bugging him and wants to leave with David, which I think is really funny. BBG is wondering why he's wanting to do all this now, and Roger is being annoying, and they kinda just go back and forth, and Roger says that that's he and his wife's business. Um, no, I already did that part. Anyway, Roger ends that part of the discussion by saying, "Just get it done as fast as you can." He then wants to talk about who's in charge of the business and the cannery and the money and the estate while Liz is incapacitated. And BBG says that goes to her next of kin, Carolyn. Roger slimily asks, well, in this instance, shouldn't the business portion be handled over to me? Her- so, I mean, someone more mature and responsible like me. He doesn't come out and say it, but and BBG says, "Not in this case, Roger," and kinda tries to shut that down. Roger asks why, and BBG says it states in Liz's will that at this moment, she's the legal mistress of this house. Roger's annoyed with his information and doesn't wanna be dictated to by his little niece. BBG says he thought that they got along, and he says, "Well, not lately. She's been all bossy and trying to fill Liz's shoes," and then he changes gears again and says, "That brings us to your friend, the so-called psychologist," and BBG's like, well, he's a real psychologist, Roger, and Roger asks what psychologists he knows host seances, and BBG says, well, maybe he has good reason for doing this. Roger is shocked and disappointed that he would be buying into any of that nonsense, but BBG says he trusts him. Roger continues to poke fun
Well,
and
I'm
make light
sorry.
of Guthrie. Oh, go ahead.
I'm interrupting. Frank believes in ghosts
He does.
when a man says there's ghosts.
Yeah, only when a
It's
man says
only
there's ghosts.
yeah.
Well, it's because a woman's
So
body is made of ghosts.
he's telling Roger like, "Oh no, he's legit because he's a man. Don't
Mhm.
listen to Vicky or Carolyn or nobody else about ghosts." But
Yeah. No, ladies are dumb. Dumb old ladies.
that would go on the band name list.
Dumb old
Dumb old
ladies.
ladies. Yeah.
I like it. Roger continues to poke fun and make light of Guthrie and his hoodoo voodoo witchcraft or whatever. He likes to bring out there was another one he did that was anyway. Once he realized BBG is backing Guthrie, he says that he will find out about him on his own and deal with him in his own way. And he takes a drink, and the lighting is spooky and makes him look real villainous, and it's fun. In the drawing room, Carolyn is on the verge of tears and flipping out, frantically flipping through a magazine. Vicky comes in and asks where Guthrie is, and Carolyn says that he's in Mother's study making notes. She asks if David is asleep, and Vicky says yes. He looks angelic when he's sleeping, and Carolyn is worried about him and feeling bad for being a bitch to him a lot. She says she feels responsibility for him and doesn't know if she's up to it. And she misses her mother so much and feels like she's not doing a good job at being baby Liz. And Vicky comforts her and says she's doing fine. And you said something, and I'm just gonna pull this in because last night, I think we had started talking about this, where I think, Vicky is maybe being a little more pro Laura because of Mother. You were saying, about Liz and Carolyn. Do you remember your
I
hypothesis?
do. I said something to the effect of maybe in the same way that Laura is exerting her will on Vicky, Liz is from her coma exerting her will on Carolyn because in addition to the responsibility of the household, she's also taking on her mannerisms and staring out the window dramatically and
Mhm.
suddenly giving a shit about David.
Yeah, like, for real, like, it may I think that's a good theory.
So
And
basically, it's just more evidence for our conspiracy theory that Liz is a secret witch, even though we're not sure if that is ever made canon in the show. We think that Liz is a witch.
we know what's true in this fictional television show. Anyway, she is spinning out though. Carolyn is frantic and asking if Vicky believes in Guthrie, and Vicky thinks he knows what he's doing. Anyway, yeah, Carolyn's freaking out, basically. That's what happens with all of this. She's breaking down more, and it kind of crescendos to her saying that she needs her mother and she wonders what if she never gets better. And Vicky tries to comfort her again and be positive, saying that she believes it will be okay and that she'll wake up. And Frank comes in, and Carolyn jumps up and asks for a plane ticket to go to Boston tomorrow. And he tries to argue with her, and he is gentle and asks her to sit down. And he says that he has something to tell her. He says he went up and saw Liz, and she looks about the same, but the doctors said a visit from family would not be good at this time. She crashes out about this hard and says the doctors must have said she's worse and that's why. And she's saying that her mother is going to die and she's freaking out. And Frank and Vicky are both trying to calm and comfort her in her grief and anxiety. And she's doing a pretty good job and is convincing of someone with a whole lot of pressure and responsibility and a potentially dying mother. She says all of the stupid doctors don't know what they're doing, and Vicky tries to tell her that Dr. Guthrie is trying everything to help, and she hollers that Guthrie is a quack, and the only thing he can think to do is conduct a ridiculous seance. Of course, just then Guthrie walks in and says, "I'm sorry you feel that way, Miss Stoddard. We can call it off if you'd like." And she quiets down but doesn't look at him. And Frank and Vicky say she had just gotten a little emotional, and that's all, but he walks over to her and says, "So should we call it off?" And she turns to him and says, "Yes, it wouldn't do any good anyway." And she says she's never going to see her mother again, at least not alive, and runs off saying, "Please leave me alone," crying. Vicky comes down the stairs and Frank is waiting at the foot of them. He asks how she is, and Vicky says, "Calm her." She asks what Liz's doctor really said, and he says, "Well, let's go into the drawing room." He says that it isn't good and that they're really not holding any hope for her to get better. She asks how she looked, and Frank says, like a woman who is living but is no longer alive. He says that that is why he wanted to keep Carolyn away. Vicky is clearly grief-stricken now and said she wished there was something that could be done. Guthrie comes in seemingly out of nowhere. Maybe he was already in there, but he says apparently there's nothing that can be done if we don't do the seance, and he won't do it if Carolyn doesn't want him to. Carolyn is eavesdropping and comes into the room, and Vicky pleads and says she knows that Carolyn would do anything to help her mother and was just upset. Carolyn says, Vicky is right. I do want to go ahead with the seance. She apologizes for her grief rage and says she wants to hold the seance and is grateful for what he's trying to do. Frank asks if he can stay for the seance, but is denied when Guthrie is saying that it should only be family members, which is interesting since Vicky will be there. Is Dr. Guthrie psychic, or is he just good at pattern recognition in obvious situations? Vicky and Carolyn leave the room, and Frank hangs back to talk to Dr. G, which I don't like as a nickname. It's just what I wrote because my hands were cramping. He says he hopes he didn't take Carolyn's words personally. He understands why she's upset and goes on to say that Mrs. Stoddard's life hangs in the balance. He does feel confident he'll find something, but maybe not as confident as he's presented to be toward the others. And he says that this is a whole new area of science that's never been explored, and he's kind of going in blind. But he does say that he believes it's worth trying. Frank wants him to make sure that the girls don't get too frightened because, they're just little girls full of ghosts. He says, well, he's frightened too. Frank asks of failure, and he says, yes, and of success. He says that if they succeed, they may unleash forces so strange and mystifying, so incomprehensible to the human mind that we may not be able to control it. End credits.
Ooh, it's time, it's
It's time. Are
time.
you ready? You're going to laugh so hard. I hope. Episode 170. Victoria Winters says, tonight's the night. We're having a seance. Just in that voice. That's what she said. In the drawing room, they are sitting around chairs, and Vicky and Carolyn are there, and Mrs. Johnson is helping as well. And she says she has certainly picked a good night for it and wanders off as the thunder goes off in the background and the wind howls. Vicky says Dr. Guthrie should be here soon, and she is panicking and thinks that they should back out because it's her turn to be having anxiety about it. Maybe Bird Lady is taking turns on the sisters to hypnotically stop the seance. And Vicky is freaking out and says she just has this awful feeling like something really horrible is going to happen to her if they go through with it. Lightning flashes in the windows behind Vicky, and the thunder rolls. Opening credits. And the thunder rolls. Carolyn says that she wishes Vicky wouldn't talk that way, even though she was just talking that way, and that nothing may come of the seance anyway. Vicky says that she's not so sure because she has chatted with Josette herself, so she knows that she would answer the call. Carolyn wishes that Vicky wouldn't talk this way. Carolyn says she lived her whole life in that house and has never seen her. Vicky says that's strange when she's not even a member of the family. And Carolyn says, "Yeah, that's weird." Vicky says she seems to maybe be psychic and sensitive and kind of opens up to Carolyn about that. Mrs. Johnson comes back in and tries to tell Carolyn spooky nonsense is only going to make things worse when everything is already so awful. But Carolyn says that they intend to do it, and Mrs. Johnson asks if they have enough chairs. She's like, okay, fine. That's above my pay grade. And Vicky says, yes, it's just the four of us. And Mrs. Johnson asks, well, what do you want me to be doing while you guys are calling the ghosts up? And Vicky says that she wants her to be sitting in with David to make sure that he stays asleep and for her to be sure not to tell him about any of the goings on because no one has said a word to him, and she tells her that no matter what happens, no matter what you might hear, don't leave David. Mrs. Johnson asks if there's anything else that they want, and Carolyn says, "Would you please bring coffee?" Carolyn says, "Can you imagine if David knew what was going on?" And Vicky says that he'd join in since he and Josette are old ghost pals. She wouldn't want Josette to try to talk through him and that she wouldn't want him to have that experience. Roger comes in saying, "What experience? The seance? You're not calling it off, are you?" And Carolyn says, "No, they're ready for Guthrie and he'll be here any minute." He talks smack about how he doubts Josette will show up, and Vicky defends her ghost benefactress. And Roger continues to tease, saying, "Well, what is it that David always says about her? That you can only see her when when you're by yourself." And there's going to be a whole mess of us here. And she's kind of like, "Well, why are you doing this then?" And he says because he wants to embarrass Guthrie before he kicks him out, essentially. Mrs. Johnson is carrying coffee, and there is a knock, and she answers it, and it's Guthrie. He comes in and takes his coat off, and he goes to wait for them in the drawing room because everyone is upstairs at this point. And he is pleased to see that everything has been set up, and she offers him coffee, and he takes some. Also, I agree with you that he's kind of dreamy. I do like Dr. Guthrie now that I've seen more of him. But anyway, he sets up a tape recorder and he's gonna record the session, and he asks Mrs. Johnson what she thinks of all of this, and she thinks it's grotesque. She's got the old religion attitude of the dead are dead and you should leave them that way and you shouldn't go poking around with things. She thinks it's unnatural. They argue ghost morality, which should also be a band name, for a minute. And then Vicky comes in and asks if they're ready, and everyone's ready to go.
I
Let's
tried
see.
to put
Oh, wait.
that in a note, ghost morality,
Uh-huh.
and it came out goat morality, which
That's
is
also
also
good.
fun.
I was gonna say, hey, you can't
And
lose.
then when I tried to type it a second time, I got ghost right, but it went goat morality, then ghost mostly, which I'm also leaving.
I like Ghost mostly. Yeah, those
Uh,
are both real good. Um, okay.
Bring us home, Becky.
I'm trying. Let's see. Carolyn comes in and says Roger will be down in a minute, and Vicky is lighting the candles. And Carolyn says that Roger is an unbeliever. Guthrie says that's just fine. Carolyn wishes them all luck in this endeavor, and Roger comes in joking that he hears a toast, but no one's drinking. He's also wearing this weird little double-breasted sailor suit that's fun. I don't know. This sailor jacket.
Roger has fun outfits.
I know. I'm always like looking at his fashion thinking, "Oh, that's pretty slick, bud." But anyway, Roger's like, "Let's get this over with for the love of God." And Guthrie asks everyone to sit at the table and he will turn out the lights. He does so and turns on the tape recorder. The storm rages outside and the candles flicker. It's all spooky and the stage is set. Dr. Guthrie begins a preamble to the seance and says that they attempt to contact Josette and that she may speak to them directly and may use one of them to speak through. Roger jokes that he would like to see her speak through Guthrie in her voice, and Guthrie says, "If you're going to make fun the whole time, you can just go ahead and fuck off now." Roger apologizes and says, "Go on." Guthrie has everybody place their hands flat on the table, and we have a cool overhead seance shot where all of their little hands are in a circle. And he says that you can't break the circle. He says all must concentrate and repeat over and over in their mind, Josette Collins. And he keeps repeating it, and we see Vicky and Carolyn staring occasionally, and Vicky turns out to be the golden pony because she starts to get possessed, and her eyes are closed, and she starts to shake a little. Guthrie says, "Come to us, Josette, come." And then Vicky's body, with presumably Josette's spirit, starts to moan and groan and make weird noises that at first sound spooky, but then
I'll
kind of
have what
sound
she's having.
like sex noises and maybe spooky sex noises. Anyway, she continues on. with her moans, and Dr. Guthrie, who is excited now too, is saying she's getting closer, closer, and she moans more. And at this point, it's not. It's sounding not unlike some of the little stories I listen to on Quinn. If you know, you know. And at this point of this weird seance sex noise party, the lightning flashes, and there's this figure silhouetted in the doorway in the drawing room, and Carolyn screams as a climax to the seance sex party. And Guthrie jumps up to go over to see what is happening, and Vicky kind of rolls her head around and goes limp, and he investigates with a candlestick, and we see that it is Laura come to break up the ghost orgy wearing a cloak. Guthrie is surprised and says, "Mrs. Collins." Vicky is all out of it and drunk on ghost juice. Carolyn helps her stand, and Laura says, "Oh, I didn't mean to interrupt, even though I knew you guys were doing your, seance tonight, and I'm evil." Carolyn is helping and comforting the dazed and previously sexily possessed Vicky. She comes in, and Roger says he thought she wasn't coming, and she says that she wasn't. But as you can see, I changed my mind. Roger says he needs a drink, and Guthrie asks Vicky what happened. And she says she remembered calling for Josette, and she had this feeling of a long corridor, and all the voices were echoes. Guthrie is stoked. He's like, "Sweet, that means Josette wants to come through about something that's urgent." And he asks Vicky if she can go again. And she says, "Sure." And Laura is like, "No, she's clearly not well. Let's not do that at all." But Guthrie says, "We must. She was so close." Laura glares at Vicky, and Vicky says, "All right, let's do it." And Laura looks annoyed. Guthrie's excited and invites Laura to join them and asks Roger if he's still skeptical. And Roger says no, he's not. Like he's like, "That was something." I don't know what it was, but it was something. So he goes and turns off the lights, and they all gather at the table. He has everybody join their hands in the circle, and we get another cool overhead seance shot, and everybody except Laura is hands in. Guthrie explains to Laura that she needs to put her hands in with her fingertips touching the other fingers. She tentatively does. He has them all concentrate and bring their minds to Josette and focus only on Josette. He says he will call out to the world of the dead, and he goes, "Josette, Josette Collins, Josette Collins, Josette, Josette, Josette Collins." And we go around with shots of Guthrie and then Vicky and then Laura, who hates this and is making hateful bitch faces the whole time. And then we see the old house, and Josette, who is more clearly Maggie than we've seen, in my opinion, then steps down and out of her painting and walks around a little, stretches her legs.
She always
She's
does that when she comes out of the painting, she does a little spin for us and
Well, yeah,
then
I mean, you
does
gotta
it.
kinda loosen up after being a painting. It makes sense to me. I know my old bones. If I were a ghost, if I had ghost bones, ghost bones, it's another one. Anyway, we're on a roll tonight, buddy, or I'm just, punchy at this point, which is probably more likely. He's hollering, "Josette, Josette, Josette Collins," and then we see Laura, who is looking worried, and Guthrie saying, "Josette, we're calling you." And Vicky starts to ghostgasm again, and Guthrie says she's here and asks Josette to speak to them. Laura is death glaring Vicky at this point. Vicky starts moaning and then speaking French. And Matthew, I did not look this up, but Matthew has sent me the translation of her ghostly, um, orgasmic French. So I'm just going to read the translation here now. There is danger here. There are thousands of empty tombstones. There is a dead woman who is not dead. She walks in the world. There is one who sleeps without sleep, without waking. There is an innocent little boy who is in serious danger. There were fires, fires for centuries. There will be another fire soon. The flames will touch the sky. The flames will consume all. There is a devilish presence. There is someone who will destroy it. This person is called. This person is called. This person.
And damn it, Josette, she has real problems with directness.
She
That was an
do.
awful lot when A, we know she speaks English because we've heard her do it before,
It's true.
and
Well,
she
maybe
could
there are
just
ghost rules that require you to be vague.
she could just be like, "It's that bitch right there.
Yeah, just
She is a
control
bird
Vicky's hand
witch."
and point. Anyway, Carolyn's asking what it means during the middle of it, and Guthrie hushes her. And she continues in French and continues to the point where Laura is doing bird eye magic at her real hard, like, and she
I
keeps
think
speaking
this is
French.
the bird lady face.
Yeah, the bird, she's making the bird lady face. And she keeps speaking French with her eyes closed and her head back and is moaning a little more. And Laura is making the even better bird lady face. And then Vicky screams in English and passes out on the table. End credits. So, the person across from me. But
Wasn't that fun?
oh, I loved it. I laughed so hard when she started making those noises and I was like, "Jesus fucking Christ, that's wild." That was
Eagle
on primetime TV.
eagle-eyed listeners who also follow us on Instagram will probably have noticed that our Instagram profile picture until just a couple of weeks ago had been Vicky with her eyes closed and her head back, and it was a photo I took of the television that had the closed captioning that just said "moaning" in brackets. That was our profile picture for a long time
It was
because
pretty amazing.
I love it.
I would go to a weird ghost sex party, I guess, maybe, I don't know. It was really funny though, and I Doctor Guthrie getting all tickled and excited and in it too, like, it was pretty good. You don't see a lot of seances on TV. You should see more of them. But yeah, that was good times.
Well, thank you for telling me and the listeners all about it.
You're very welcome. Thank you for telling me and the listeners about last week's when I was indisposed,
This week, dear listeners, we will get our shit together, and
theoretically.
we will watch the show together, and we will record in person and release the episode on time.
Well, barring anything too tragic. But yes,
Follow us on Instagram at Ghosts Want You Dead. Join our Patreon at patreon.com/ghosts want you dead. This program is brought to you by Amy and Austin and Jacob. It
it'd
should
be you two,
also
listener.
include you. Yes, you. I will mail you cute stuff, the next 5 of you,
It's true.
which I am really going to do sometimes.
Well,
I have all the things, I just have to mail them. Okay,
I love you.
you too.
Goodbye.
Bye, we're hanging up now.